The views and opinions of this program are those of the host, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading.
For over 95 years, we've set the bar. Power, we restored it. Protection, we reinvented it. Record yields, we redefined it. If there's one thing we know at FS, it's that just because something hasn't been done, doesn't mean it can't be done. We're never satisfied unless we take your farming operation to the next level. Run your equipment at peak efficiency and bust the bins this season. Visit fssystem.com.
Well, joining us now here on the program, it is time for our monthly conversation that we have with Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director for Agriculture with Osborne Barr Paramore, OBP, former FSA Administrator. Always great to have him with us here on the show. And Richard, great to talk with you again, and hope things are going good there in Northwest Missouri for you.
Well, Jesse, as always, great to talk to you. And yeah, I think things are going pretty well in Northwest Missouri and really kind of this region of the country. Harvest is in full swing, and obviously, folks are always excited about harvest.
Very, very true. Well, let's start there before we dive into a few other deeper topics and issues this month. How is harvest looking? What are you hearing from folks around you there? What are you seeing on your home farm? The term variability has been thrown around a lot this year, and I hate to use it again, but it's the best way I could describe what I have heard across the Corn Belt. So how's things looking in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, so we've got some producers around that have been probably harvesting a couple of weeks. Some of the larger operators, I'm seeing combines running, but not to that fever pitch, rate that we'll see here probably in another few days in this locale. But if you go south of here, my gosh, they're really going. A lot of the crops have been taken out. Central Missouri, and then there's other places where harvest is advanced. When I said everybody's excited about harvest, they are because I think everybody's anxious to see what's out there. And you said, variability is the word, I think, this year for harvest, and I think it is. When we were really needing a rain, and I know a lot of places, around the country, when they were really needing a rain, a lot of that rain was pretty spotty. And so I think there will be variability in the field, in a specific field, where we're going to see I think we're going to see some yield fluctuation that's pretty dramatic. So we started harvest yesterday on soybeans. We've done no corn yet. And that soybean yields they look pretty good. They've looked pretty good all year. Again, we had that tough stretch, the beginning of the growing season, but we've had some rains, some pretty timely rains throughout the growing season. And, I've heard some 70 bushel soybeans, some maybe a little better than that, some obviously under that, but I think soybean yields, at least in this part of the world, are going to be pretty decent. Corn, again, that's another question. I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where we'll see what happens as the combines roll, and we'll get an idea and look at those yield monitors, and that'll tell us the final story. That's for sure. Well, let's segue to some other topics. There's a lot going on here as we've wrapped up the month of September and getting into October. A lot going on in Washington, D.C. Everything from trying to get a farm bill done to a government shutdown here to other legislation going on through Capitol Hill. So let's just start with the government shutdown, this whole situation that we have here. It just feels like one of those situations that could drag on for some time because of the deep divide in the House, right, Richard?
Yeah, you set that up perfectly. When we think about, I guess from a personal experience standpoint, when we talk about government shutdowns, obviously they're politically motivated in most cases. There's a divide philosophically about what should happen, what should be in that continuing resolution or that budget bill or whatever you want to call it. But when we have a government shutdown, I experienced two of those when I was at USDA. One lasted just a few hours, and one lasted, I think, 31 days. And so, just from a legality standpoint, at USDA, specifically Farm Service Agency, we had to have documents in place. We had to have a plan to handle the government shutdown, which takes lots of man hours, takes a lot of keep taking your eye off of the ball of what you need to be doing as an agency to prepare for a shutdown. And then certainly once that shutdown happens, different administrations, in the executive branch will handle those shutdowns differently. Essential who's deemed essential. Obviously at USDA, there'll be food inspection. There'll be some other things, that will be deemed essential. But a lot of those services that we have come to depend on and expect and know are going to be there likely will be closed. For example, your your service centers, NRCS, FSA, rural development, all those kinds of things, likely will be closed. Again, it has to do with how the administration wants to handle it. There are some agencies that are funded differently and probably have the legal ability to stay working, while others are not. And so I think it'll be interesting how if we go into a government shutdown, how this administration is going to handle that. Who are they going to deem essential? Who are they going to basically require to work? And who's not? But
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, and you have a great perspective on this, formerly at FSA, talking about those essential workers, because I've heard some folks throw around the term in conversations with me about a brownout, not necessarily a shutdown, but kind of a more, okay, some folks are definitely going to be, laid off, so to speak, and not working, while other folks will still continue to work. So when you say the term shutdown, is it really correct to say shutdown, or is it more of a kind of, essential workers are working and some people who are not deemed essential are not, so it's not a complete and total shutdown? Is that more a better way to say it?
I think so. I mean, if you think about federal services, certainly TSA at the airports will be working. Air traffic control, those folks will be working. Certain federal law enforcement agencies will be working because they have to. At USDA, again, I think it might come down to what's the secretary's priorities, and who is he going to deem essential and who is he not going to deem essential as far as who's working. And I did mention, some agencies are funded differently. And so if they have employment funding still available, which some do, those folks could continue to work while the people maybe on the other side of the hallway don't have funding and will not work. And so it'll be up to a degree. It'll be up to the secretary and the administration from a USDA perspective, who actually will be required to go in there. But keep in mind, if most of those folks that'll be working during a government shutdown are not getting paid, they're going into work and not being paid. There's never been a government shutdown where there's been a lapse in funding for the government. That when Congress did strike a deal, that those folks were not paid retroactively. But at the same time, I've talked to a number of folks about this, and if we do go into a government shutdown, if they trip that trigger, right? Like, so they say we're not funding this, and we go into a technical government shutdown, there's not a ton of there won't be a lot of motivating factors to speed this up and get it done, and so it could go on for some time, because of that philosophical divide around policy issues. If you've got the mindset that this is the only way we're going to solve this is to not fund the government, to get people to the table, you've got to have a bringing together of that philosophical divide
Mhm.
before there's conversation about let's end this shutdown. So if it happens, I think it could last a while.
I think you are exactly right there as well. I think it could last a while, and there would be a lot of impacts that are felt here, not just the broader economy and the broader, the country, but within agriculture as well. Certain reports probably won't be available. How long does that drag on? What impact does that have on the markets and more? There's a lot of layers to this that could be very, very impactful and hurtful here to agriculture, Richard.
Yeah, they could, and you're right. I mean, obviously, a lot of the supply and demand reports, crop condition, crop progress reports, that keep folks informed. Certainly, that
Mhm.
informs the market. And again, I would say that Secretary Vilsack is going to have to make some of those decisions as to who will be working, who will not be working. From an FSA standpoint. If they're still producers that are participating in a disaster program, for
Sure.
example. And I know, big swaths of the country were in drought this summer. The livestock forage program, LFP, for example, is an active program. If those workers they tell those workers to go home, those payments will be held up until they come back to work to finish the applications and so on. I would expect that, and again, FSA is the one that I have some insight in. I would expect that FSA employees are really humping it, at the tail end of this week to try to get as much done as they can before a potential shutdown. But then you also think about like the farm loan side of FSA. Whether folks are needing to borrow money, whether they're wanting to make payments. There'll be no one there to receive those payments. What we did, when we had the shutdown in 1819, was we just basically there was a moratorium, on like loan payments and so on. We thought that they were in there. We thought that they had come in, and we just treated it like they did. So no one was penalized for a late payment. Because we didn't really have the ability at the beginning anyway, we didn't have the ability to know when that payment had arrived, but making loans is going to be a little bit of a problem, certainly during that shutdown.
Well, and I have to think as well, obviously, any sort of shutdown here is going to further delay a farm bill that I think it's pretty much a given at this point that a 1 year extension is going to have to be had here. And then also, maybe they still get something new written by Christmas. I know that's been floated, but could it be 1 year? I've even heard Senator Grassley came out here this past week and said he expects 1 year and he hopes it's not two. So I mean, it feels like there's, with all of the tensions and the division on Capitol Hill, it's just pushing things like a farm bill further down the road.
Oh, it will. I do think that there's been a lot of work already done on this 23 farm
Very
bill.
true. Yeah, very true.
And so we could be surprised. Now, certainly a government shutdown is going to bring everything to a screeching halt, right? For all practical purposes, around things that aren't budget related or continuing resolution related or whatever. But again, there's been quite a bit of work done. So once, if there is a shutdown and once that's resolved and folks come back together and start working on, the work of the people, it could happen fairly quickly, just given the amount of work that's already been done on it.
Yeah. Good thoughts there. I want to ask you as well, here this past week, the checkoff amendment, Victoria Sparks from Indiana, her anti-checkoff amendment was struck down in the House. And I know that was applauded by a lot of ag groups who were very much against that anti-checkoff legislation. What's your thoughts on that getting struck down in the House?
Yeah, I was very hopeful that would have been the result. And I think we talked about this maybe last time we were together, Jesse. I don't know what the motivation is around some of that's happening. Because again, I'm very familiar with the soybean checkoff. The approval percentage of the soybean checkoff is upper 70s, low 80s%. Mm-hmm. I think folks recognize the value of assessing themselves and, basically putting, research and marketing and, innovation development in their own hands. Yeah. By making those investments and having those dollars managed by farmers. I think by and large folks are supportive of that. And I don't know what the groundswell or literally the motivation behind some of this stuff, but it was struck down, and it was resoundingly struck down. I don't know what the total vote count was, but it was significantly defeated. And so maybe that pulls folks back a little bit on, trying to be critical or trying to change the law as it relates to commodity checkoffs across a whole bunch of them. Right. And I think that it was an opportunity for organizations to mobilize. Like I saw a lot of stuff yesterday just flying around, notify your congressman, notify your U.S. senator, that this can't pass. And so a lot of work was done, certainly leading up to this, but like at the the 11th hour, people really mobilizing and trying to get this thing defeated. And it went down in flames.
Well, before we run out of time, great things we've covered again. I know there's a lot going on. Anything else that you are kind of keeping an eye on here or watching throughout agriculture as we are getting into the month of October, Richard?
Well, just some of those, I guess, fundamental things that we all kind of look at in agriculture. Certainly keeping an eye on interest rates. The Fed decided not to raise interest rates this last time, but they also had a cautionary tale or a cautionary message in there that said, well, we might raise them next time.
A hawkish pause, I think, was the term that was thrown around. A hawkish pause. Yeah.
Yes. Which I love that. That's I mean, just to think about that's kind of
it's a good way to put it, I guess.
It is. Yeah, it definitely is. Obviously interest rates are on folks' minds. Yep. Energy costs, we're seeing $4.20, $4.30 diesel fuel, here for on-road diesel. That keeps creeping up, and when we see higher energy costs, that affects like everything. And then, I think in the back of people's minds is what's going to happen with this, the presidential election. That, it's in 24, but that's not a great long time. We're just a little over a year away from a presidential election, and all of the things that'll lead up to that, we're kind of keeping an eye on that as well, and just see if there's any signaling that's coming out of, different candidates' camps. And, it's an opportunity, I know this and all your listeners know this, but it's an opportunity for people to put some ideas forward. Now, they may not be the nominee, but they've talked about things that could be in conversations in the future, right? So, just listening to what some of the candidates have to say and where their mind is around where the country ought to be. And if you listen real closely, sometimes there's some ag policy stuff in what they say. So we're paying attention to that as well.
Definitely. Well, always appreciate the time and the thoughts with you here each and every month. Richard Fordyce, Business Growth Director of Agriculture with Osborne Barr Paramore OBP. Thanks for joining me. We'll talk to you again next month.
So that sounds great, Jesse. Good to talk to you.